word mature is something that means a lot of things to a lot of people. For some, you can chop a dude's head off on screen, have all of the characters cursing like they're in The Wolf of Wall Street, or have explicit fan service that I definitely will not show in this video.
Same, yeah.
And to a lot of people, that is what mature means. Something intended for an older audience, something that you ordinarily wouldn't want a child watching, at least not if you're a decent parent anyways. But is that all being mature actually means? Is it really something that you can boil down to something that shallow? Well, that line of thinking is immature in itself, my dear Watson, because in actuality...
If he comes out before the 25th, I might spend money on him. Let's see. If I remember correctly, I think we got under 10 days before he comes out. Okay. Oh, that's you. Oh, freaking! I just now looked at Discord. Then yeah, like if he's gonna be coming out in the next few days, so definitely you're gonna get him before the 25th. Like that's like easy, yeah.
It's super easy to write something that is intended for an older audience. I myself could easily include any kind of 18+ related material in this script or in this video if I really wanted to, at least if I didn't care about YouTube blacklisting me anyways. But if I did that, it wouldn't necessarily be mature, at least not mature in the way that we're going to be discussing today. No, it takes a different kind of maturity to approach subject matter, approach tone, approach relationships in a way that feels deliberate, nuanced, and genuine. Mushoku Tensei Jobless Reincarnation is a mature series. It is a story that balances so many characters, relationships, and climactic moments that define what I think true maturity is in storytelling.
Thank you. Someone has acknowledged this. Thank you. I'm already agreeing with a lot of stuff he's saying on this video. We're only 1 minute and 25 seconds in. Jesus, thank the Lord.
If you have even a cursory knowledge of this series, you might be thinking, I'm a little bit insane for saying that the series with the reincarnated
You're not insane.
baby that makes
You're not
weird
insane.
faces while staring at beautiful women is anything even remotely mature. But if you look beneath the surface, if you look further into this series,
and you read the manga, and you listen to the light novels, or read the light novels, you will tell the difference.
You'll start to see so many wonderful things that make up the DNA of this story. And I can safely say, after finishing all of Season 1, that Mushoku Tensei is the most mature anime series I've seen in a long time. Now, before I start building the picture of what makes this series so mature in my eyes, I want to dispel a pretty consistent misconception people have about the story in Mushoku Tensei. And while we're at it, why not kill two birds with one stone and actually convey why that misconception in itself is one of the things that I think makes this series mature. Fan service is nothing new in anime. It's been there since the beginning, it's always going to be there, and it exists in multiple different forms. Now, I actually think that fan service has gotten quite a bit better compared to how it was in the 2000s, or are purely using their fan service for pandering, going for all the critics say that Mushoku Tensei gets for its sexualization and its fan service. I can say that I never really felt once like the sexualization of its characters was meant for the sake of me, for the sake of the audience. It always felt like there was a purpose behind the ecchi. There was always a character being fleshed out, no pun intended. I'm not gonna sit here and say that the ecchi didn't help them market this series or their merchandise, or that the Ellie and Elise gangbang was writing something for a story.
I have to skip some of these parts.
And I think Mushoku Tensei's fan service is mature in the way that it's always doing something to contribute to the storyline and to its characters. In fact, there are a lot of honestly kind of uncannily realistic, to the point where I'm positive that both the writer and the anime team were trying to convey the uncomfortable side to these ecchi moments as well. And that kind of leads us directly into multiple plot points in the series that I consider the height of this story's maturity. And it all comes down to how this series handles its relationships. There's two prime examples of this that really stick out in my head, and I want to start with the one that takes place the earliest in the series. It's practically almost
Rudy
at the beginning of the story.
and
I
Eris, I
it was
think.
the first of many times in the series that I realized Mushoku Tensei is not what I thought it was.
Wait, no. He's gonna talk about Rudy and his father, Paul.
It is not following a formula. It is not resting on tropes or familiarity. It's constantly challenging and subverting what you think of these characters, but in a way that feels so natural and so right to the themes of the story, you'll be wondering why more stories don't explore these kinds of problems as well. From the very first episode, you are introduced to the main character's family, his mother, his father, and the maid that works for them.
Yep.
And over the span of the first 3 episodes, they really draw you into this environment. This is a normal, warm, kind-hearted family that cares for their son, no matter how much of a creep he ends up acting like. And you start to form this bond of trust with them. You form that familiarity that I was mentioning earlier. This is a straightforward isekai series where this kid grows up in a fantasy environment and makes the most out of his life. This series makes you believe that. And then we get to episode 4, and everything comes crashing down. It turns out the father, Paul Greyrat, is a cheating, degenerate philanderer who has a history with the maid. Shell shock moment of the series, in my opinion. I mean, just 1 episode ago, we were having a heart-to-heart father-son moment with this guy, and they do such a good job of really making you believe in his virtue and in his character. This is a guy who most people respected, and that is what makes this so goddamn brilliant. At the end of the day, even by the end of this season, I can honestly say that I still love Paul. He has his character.
To summarize, pretty much he got tricked by the maid, because the maid was the person that pulled him in to do it per se, but he's at the same time he's at fault just as much as the maid, because he should have resisted the temptation. And so because of that, she got pregnant, and the whole family had to sit down and have a conversation about what's gonna happen to the baby. And in that moment, like before every bit of that, you're like, okay, I like Paul, you know, what he did to Rudy and everything at first, about how he didn't want to listen to him when he was trying to explain to him about something that happened with some kids. But like, other than that, he was a good father. Like, there was nothing wrong with him until that happened. And that is so well done, how it changes like the whole family structure right then and there.
Flaws, yeah, cheating on his wife, not exactly a likable trait, but there's so many facets to his character, especially when you get into some of the events that happen later on in the season, that you really can't just dismiss this guy as simply the cheating husband. Imagine you have somebody in your life that you really trust, somebody that you care about, somebody that you respect, just somebody that you think you have a good understanding of and have placed your trust in them. And then imagine one day you learn something about that person that changes your entire perception of them. Now, there's a lot of different responses to this, but I think most people in that situation would feel conflicted and they would feel betrayed. And those are exactly the feelings that I think episode 4 of Mushoku Tensei conveys to the audience.
Which is done really well, because in your head you think of Paul as like this young father that has this kid who's trying to understand them, you know, that gives them love, teaching them swordsman, and just being a regular father. And once he does that one thing, then it's like it pretty much ruins the image that you have of this perfect father in your head. And that's what's basically what he's saying.
This is a complex situation, and this is a complex character who grows and changes throughout the series, and shows that even in spite of some horrible decisions that he's made, it's not something that defines you as a character. Paul has good sides as well. He takes responsibility for his actions and his mistakes. He still legitimately loves his wife. He loves Lilia the maid. He loves his children. and he does his best for every single one of them. That is the reason I can look at Paul's character by the end of this series and say that I legitimately like a man who cheated on his wife. Mushoku Tensei takes these problems, takes these flaws of these characters.
Now just clip that, put it on Twitter, and see what happens.
And effortlessly conveys them in a way that is mature. I promise you that the majority of writers out there would not be able to make you like a character like Paul the way you do by the end of this season. Speaking of not liking characters, let's talk about the main character. Now, I have an entire video about why I like Rudeus Greyrat, and why that I think it's okay to like him, even in spite of some of his more questionable aspects. So I'm not going to regurgitate a lot of what I said in that video, but one thing I do want to focus on is the main motivation for his character.
It's okay to not like Rudeus on the first season. He's not supposed to be liked. When you look at his backstory, and you listen to all the things he has did, in your head you're gonna be like, yeah, I really don't like this person. Fine. But like, if you just sit here and watch the dang anime, and just because you can't like a character does not mean that it ruins the whole entire anime. Just watch it. There's a lot more to it than just because he did these things, I just cannot watch it.
And just one of the main driving themes of the entire series as a whole. A lot of isekai, and just a lot of stories in general, feel the need to be more ambitious than necessary, I think. They take it upon themselves to give their characters grand goals, immediate hooks, and fast descents into their arcs to really get the plot going and get the audience invested.
Exactly.
Mushoku Tensei
doesn't
really do that. In fact, it's only really by nearly halfway through season 1 that you actually have some form of stakes and goal for the characters.
Exactly.
And I really realize that that might sound like a bad thing, but it's actually one of my favorite parts about this first season. Let's say if time travel is the narrative hook of ReZero, or parody is the narrative hook of Konosuba, then I would say the narrative hook for Mushoku Tensei is watching a trauma-induced NEET find a new love and motivation for living.
Exactly.
Not exactly something that would jump out to a normie reading it in a synopsis, but it is just so earnest and heartfelt in this depiction of a character who absolutely loathes their past self and wants to do everything in their power to live a more fulfilling life. It's endearing, it's extremely relatable, and I think it just takes a ton of faith, not to mention maturity, to release a story like that and execute it so well. I mean, this is one of the most gimmick-ridden genres of anime that exists.
It really is.
Releasing a story that not only doesn't have a gimmick, but is hinged on guy lives in house for the first 2 volumes. It was very...
Literally. The whole season 1, you're literally just getting to know the characters and him, and also a little bit of his past, but just finding out like, hey, this is a long ride type of anime. It's not something that's gonna go bloom quick. He's gonna become really powerful. Like, he's the best thing out here in the world. Like, no, like, you're gonna really, it's like a slow burn. And you're really just enjoying watching Rudy go from a kid to a teenager, or somewhat of a teenager, then an adult, and then et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like, to be honest with you, this anime can really take, or can really go really, really far if they really want to. Because the light novel and the manga does this so well. It's so good. I just don't understand anyone who hasn't watched this. In my opinion, it's so good.
Forward thinking, and it's something that ironically still stands out today as being really refreshing and something that I wish more stories took from. And if we're talking about things I wish more stories took from, then I guess I want to kind of end this dive into maturity with maybe my favorite and most interesting display of it that I can think of that I think can be found in this series. Earlier in the video, I mentioned there being 2 prime examples of relationships in this story that really stood out to me in a believable, nuanced, and heartfelt way. This relationship begins near the beginning of the series, and it spans almost the entire season until it reaches its culmination and conclusion at the very end. I am of course talking about the relationship between Rudeus and Eris. And ironically, or maybe not ironically,
Eris is best girl.
One of the biggest sources
100%.
of controversy throughout this entire series because of the way it doesn't shy away from its subject matter. And that's something that I not only really respect, but it's also handled in a way that actually kind of becomes the core of this entire season's narrative. Like I mentioned before, the series doesn't really have any kind of big direction or goal for the first 8 episodes of the series. It's primarily just a bunch of slice of life drama shenanigans with Rudeus and co as he lives his life the best he can. In episode 5, we're introduced to the character Eris through some lighthearted kidnapping shenanigans, and the next 3 episodes are essentially about Rudeus and Eris learning more about each other to the point where they start loving and respecting each other. It's a wonderful little arc just in these 3 episodes, watching how their relationship changes in really subtle, nuanced ways. However, everything changes in episode 8 for multiple reasons, but the biggest being a giant death laser that teleports both Rudeus and Eris to a completely different continent in the middle of nowhere with no means of survival.
And another thing, another good point about this series is the characters, like all the characters that Rudy meets and everything, they're not just like love him or just treat him like, oh, since he's the main character, that everyone is gonna be fond of him. Like literally, Eris beat the living crap out of him. The moment he said anything to her, she beat the crap out of him. And on top of that, when he first met her, he turned around and slapped her back because he didn't like the fact that she was being rude to him. And when he slapped her in the face, she instantly cold-cocked him on the spot and demanded and chased after him to beat the crap out of him. So like, even there, the characters wasn't just like in love with each other or like, okay, since you're the main character, then we gotta be buddies. Like, it's even a slow burn with the character development with each other. So I mean, I just don't understand how people say this anime is not good.
This is when the series officially shifts from the laid-back drama slice of life it was before and turns into something completely different. This grand fantasy journey epic with the sole purpose of getting Eris back home. From episode 8 all the way to the final episode, that is the goal driving the entire series.
And literally it was the plot
and misadventures along the way, but what I'm getting at is that this is the first time Rudeus has been given complete agency in the plot, and fittingly it's with the stakes being someone's life that he really cares about. Through this journey across the continents, more than the wild locations, more than the dramatic encounters that happen, Rudeus and Eris's relationship is the core of everything that's going on. And just like those 3 episodes in Eris's home, they keep developing and pushing this relationship forward in really smart and understated ways. However, of those ways, I think the strongest really comes down to Eris's character and how she views herself relative to Rudeus. Throughout this entire adventure, you watch Eris consistently, practically every single episode, training either by herself or with Rudeus to become stronger and feel like she's contributing and holding her own in this group. She's surrounded by 2 people who she not only looks up to, but realizes probably have more power and ability than she does. And not only is that really frustrating for her, but it's what pushes her to continue training as hard as she does. You can see this even by the start of part 2, when Rudeus gets his demon eye, beats Eris in a sword fight despite all of the training that she does, and that leaves her really hurt and depressed because of all the work that she's trying to do to catch up. Nice going with your Deus Ex Machina power, Rudeus. Eventually, all of those feelings of inadequacy culminate in episode 21, called Turning Point 2. The meeting and fight with the dragon god Orsted that ends in catastrophic defeat and the near death of Rudeus Greyrat. This episode is really, really smart and really understated with the focus it puts on Eris and her own feelings of weakness, and you might not even pick up on what it's doing until you watch it in retrospect. The episode begins with yet another ridiculously well animated sparring session between Eris and Rudeus, and finally, Finally, after half a season of training with this man, Ruijerd finally acknowledges Eris's efforts and tells her that she has proven herself as a fully fledged warrior.
Not just that, it was her birthday as well.
She may not be on Ruijerd's level, but she's clearly progressed and grown in a way that he felt was worth recognition. You can not only see the sheer level of joy and happiness this gives her, protect that goddamn smile, but it also gives her confidence in those places that she's always been striving towards. It's a crazy feel-good scene. It's so nice to see a character as pure and endearing as Eris finally be acknowledged, and everything seems to be going well. And then Orsted destroys all of them with basically no effort at all. This is the point where Eris's confidence, her hopes, her progress, her growth, all of it are essentially dunked into the mud in a way that shapes the entire ending of this season. And it shapes it in a way that is so emotionally impactful and so melancholic that it's still hard to think about now without getting really depressed. Eris blames herself for the loss to Orsted. She blames herself and her weakness for the fact that Rudeus almost died. And this is what leads her to her ultimate decision in episode 22 to leave Rudeus behind and grow stronger so she's worthy to stand by him in the future. In episode 8, Turning Point 1, Rudeus tries to have sex with Eris, and that ultimately ends in failure, not because she doesn't like him, but because she doesn't feel ready. She makes a promise with him that in 5 years, when he turns into an adult, that is when she will be ready, and that's when they can do it. At the end of this journey, after Turning Point 2, Eris has resolved herself, and now she is the one pushing Rudeus to have sex, not out of maliciousness, but because she knows it's the last time that she's going to see him, at least for a very long time. What follows is probably the most tasteful, emotionally impactful, resonant sex scene that I've ever seen in an anime, and it's executed in a way that feels like the culmination and payoff of watching one relationship develop over the course of an entire series. It is masterfully done. It is the emotional peak of the entire season, and it's the moment where I truly realized what sets Mushoku Tensei apart from other anime. In the final episode...
And that was a big controversial thing. Like, the scene didn't show anything really bad. It wasn't... Like, it was done really, really well. The only big issue is that Rudeus' mind, or Rudeus, the person that's in his body, or in Rudy's body, is a grown man, okay? But he's in a kid's body. He didn't make Eris do it. She came to her own resolve after everything they've been through. So, I mean... I just didn't understand why a lot of people like threw a fit over this, but yeah, I think that was pretty stupid.
Both Rudeus and Eris move on their separate paths, Rudeus finding the will to move on despite being abandoned, and Eris proclaiming her love, which motivates her journey to become stronger. I have no doubt they will meet again. I have no doubt that those feelings will always remain between them, and it's by far not only my favorite part of this series, but also the greatest form of maturity that can be found in Mushoku Tensei so far. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and if you have any examples of maturity in the writing that I didn't mention that stood out to you, I'd love to hear about them in the comments below. Join the Discord in the description if you want to chat. I love you all, and I will see you in the next video.
I enjoyed it. I enjoyed this, dude. Like, there's no way that someone, like, cause I just haven't seen an isekai that has done this well with this type of genre and like all the other stuff that's putting together. Like, it was done really, really well. I enjoyed every bit of Mushoku Tensei. Like, so yeah, I think that's it on the watching videos though.